Chapter 32. The white lights of the office suddenly felt blinding, the blazing illumination of reality. My hands were frozen over Bella's chest as her heart beat feebly. Once, twice. "Come on, sweetheart," I whispered. "That's right. Come on, love." I leaned down and blew 2 breaths into her. Her heart had paused again, and I lay my hands back against her skin, ready to start compressions. But then the feeble beats started. Suddenly, Bella's chest moved as she gasped, choking slightly, and then she pulled in a long, ragged breath. Her heart started to beat more soundly, faster, faster, pounding, racing. She pulled in several more large breaths, color flushing back into her skin. "Oh, Bella! Oh, God!" I wrapped my arms around her upper body, pulling her limp form to me, kissing her head again and again. "Bella, Bella, I love you. I love you so much. Oh, thank God, Bella." Her heart sped against my chest, and her breath washed over me in full, even breaths. I buried my face into her neck, feeling my body convulse, breaking down with overpowering emotion. Intense, overwhelming grief and the after effects of horror and despair racked through me, my chest heaving as I clung to her. The memories of what had just occurred rained down on me. Bella's shriek of agony, the feel of my teeth slicing through her skin, the agonized pleas of the baby, her spine snapping. Oh no, her spine! I was just going to injure her further lifting her up like this. I quickly and carefully laid her back down on the table. I was shaking all over. I smoothed her hair back. She was still completely unresponsive. "Oh, thank you, Bella. You did it. Oh, God." I covered my face with a hand, trying to subside the irrational shaking. Suddenly, the door of the office banged open, and I whipped my head to the side. Alice stood in the doorway. Her expression was wild, her eyes wide, and there were healing compressions on her face. I had a quick glimpse from her mind of her on her knees in the bedroom, moaning, fingers digging into her own face, thinking Bella was gone. "Edward!" she shrieked, and launched herself across the room, leaping into my arms and wrapping her legs around me. "Oh, Edward, you did it! You did it!" She kissed me on my cheeks and forehead. "Alice," I gasped, trying to pull her arms off me. She slid down to stand in front of me. "Look." I moved my eyes to Bella's body, and she followed my glance. Bella lay naked, the wound on her stomach still open and oozing thick blood. Her torso was at an odd angle, and her legs were splayed out. Her midsection was black and blue, and several broken ribs were pushing through her skin. She was unconscious. Alice's face blanched, and she hissed slightly as she fully took in Bella's condition. But then she shook her head and turned back to me. Taking my face firmly between her hands, she held my eyes. "No, Edward," she whispered. "Look." And in her mind unfolded the vision of Bella we had seen earlier in the day, only this time it did not disappear. Bella stood looking at herself in front of a large mirror. I recognized it now from Rosalie's room. She was wearing a pale, sky-blue dress that clung to her perfect, healed body. The planes of her face were different, sharper, more defined, but her beauty was the same as it had ever been. Her skin was smooth, pearl white, and her eyes were bright, blood red. She did not smile, but viewed the reflection in the mirror warily. The vision was a little hazy, and the edges were blurred out, although even in the seconds that Alice held it in her head, it began to grow just a minute bit clearer, exposing the hand of someone next to Bella. But it was definitely firm, unwavering, and real. "Oh, Alice!" I choked out. Every nerve, every muscle in my body clenched and twisted, and I felt as though I might be crushed by the joy and relief. She really is going to be okay. I wrapped my arms around Alice, and we held each other. letting the vision feed us, restore us. Finally, I pulled away and looked back at Bella. She was still unconscious, and worry quickly seeped through the happiness. I needed to call Carlisle.
"Hey, back off!"
I heard Rosalie say from downstairs. I froze, turning to stare at Alice. Her mind was searching, blank, seeing nothing. It could only be Jacob. I saw him through Rosa's eyes, his hand outstretched towards Renesmee, his face dazed.
"Don't you dare touch her!"
Rosalie shouted.
"Help!"
"Stay," I hissed at Alice, flying for the door. Jasper ran past in the hallway, and by the time I made it to the upstairs landing, Jasper had Jacob pinned against the front wall of the house by the throat. Rosalie stood on the other side of the room, clutching the baby, who she had covered with a blanket. I grasped the railing, looking down.
"He tried to touch the baby,"
she snarled. I turned and stared at Jacob in confusion and shock. He was standing stock still, hands at his side, breathing roughly, as Jasper's hand pushed against his neck, holding him to the wall with one hand. I was amazed he hadn't phased before Jasper got to him, and it was too late now. If he even attempted, Jasper would rip his throat out, and Jacob knew it. "Please, Edward," he thought. His entire mind was humming with some sort of emotional overload. "Please just listen first." He began to play back the moments after he had left the office, as he had slowly walked out the door, into the ocean of pain. The other side so far away I couldn't imagine it, much less see it. He started down the stairs, leaving behind the sounds of Bella's heart being forced to beat. I wanted to somehow pour bleach inside my head and let it fry my brain, to burn away the memory of Bella's final minutes. At the bottom of the step, he had seen Rosalie holding the baby, and he had felt. Jacob's thoughts stumbled suddenly, as if he had crashed into a wall in his mind. He blinked quickly, trying to regain focus, eyes flickering to the floor for a moment, and then back to mine. He retrained his thoughts around something, avoiding it. Unbelievable. He was hiding something from me, some part of the memory, something he didn't want me to see, didn't want me to know. I growled softly, and he closed his eyes, ignoring my irritation and going on with his story. Rosalie had lifted the baby onto her shoulder. Warm brown eyes gazed at him, the color of milk chocolate. Bella's eyes. And suddenly, heat, burning, glowing, as everything inside him came undone, and then was reconnected, unbreakable. 1,000,000 steel cables, all tying me to one thing, the very center of the universe. I stared at him, thunderstruck, trying to wrap my mind around his words, trying to interpret the cataclysmic shift that had occurred in his mind. The gravity of the earth no longer ties me to this place. It is her that holds me here now. Renesmee. Renesmee. He reached out, only wanting to touch her one time. No! My entire body stiffened, the wood railing beneath my hands splintering. Raw, unadulterated shock coursed through me, stunning in its unexpected depth and intensity. Not possible! My body felt like it was flushed with ice, rocked by a frigid blast of comprehension, an appalling realization I could not fight or deny. Jacob had imprinted on Renesmee. Renesmee, my newborn daughter, out of the womb for only minutes. My child, my daughter. And in a fraction of a second, the glacier of shock dissolved into an instantaneous explosion of heated anger and hatred. Damn him! Damn him to the furthest corners of hell! The moment that Bella and I were sealed together for eternity, he decides to tie himself permanently to my daughter. Unable to steal Bella from me, he decides to take her, my daughter, our daughter, the daughter I had hardly even held in my arms. Waves of uncontrolled fury washed through me. Was there nothing that I loved in this world that Jacob didn't want to take from me? Was he put on this earth merely as a design of cruel fate, created to dog my every step, to covet the things that I held most precious and dear? I could barely see through the red haze of rage. I was gripped by a wrathful possessiveness. I would not let him have her. I would not go through this again with him. I would kill him first. My eyes moved slowly from Jacob's face down to Jasper's hand on his throat. Jacob's eyes followed my gaze. It would be so easy. Just one word to Jasper, and this would all be over. Seth and Leah were far away, unknowing, and I could end this travesty once and for all. "You know I didn't do it on purpose, Edward," Jacob thought. "You know I have no choice." "Shut up," I mentally screamed. "Shut up. I know that. Of course I know that. It doesn't make me hate it any less." My eyes traveled slowly over to Rosalie and the baby. Rose was shielding Renesmee's face with a blanket, so she could not see the standoff occurring in front of her. But I was stricken to discover that, in the gentle, warm pool of her thoughts, she was thinking of Jacob, seeing him standing at the foot of the stairs, staring at her. Her mind was alight with vivid fascination, pulling to the vision of his face, his burning eyes.
"Jacob,"
she thought eagerly, and I shuddered. I looked back at Jacob's face. He was not even watching me anymore, his eyes now on Renesmee's small form in Rosalie's arms. Even as he knows I am deciding his fate, he cannot keep his eyes from her. Love for her sinks through his whole body, pulsing through his veins and humming through his limbs. How much he loves her. I remembered Jacob's thoughts from earlier in the day. He can't hate what loves Bella. Could I hate what loved Renesmee? And could I destroy it? "What's it going to be, Edward?" thought Jasper. His thoughts were dull, clouded. He was confused by our intense emotions, and he was trying to repel them. I realized suddenly how emotionally ravaged and drained he was, and he did not want to kill Jacob, not today. Neither did I. Jacob's eyes flickered back to my face, thoughts of Renesmee ringing through his mind, all-consuming. Renesmee, Renesmee. My teeth clenched in renewed fury, but I could not deal with this now. I had to get back to the office. I was furious for having been forced to leave it all. I needed to be with Bella, and he was keeping me from her. Damn him again. Jacob and I would have this out, but not now. Ultimately, for the time being, there was no doubt that Renesmee was perfectly safe with Jacob, at least physically, and that was all that mattered right now. "Let him go," I said softly, my voice coming out more mechanically than I had intended. Jasper released his throat immediately and stepped several steps back. Jacob's eyes were locked onto mine. "Thank you, Edward."
"Edward!"
Renesmee's mind filled with the sound of my voice, looking for me, her vision marred by the blanket. My gaze dragged back to the small, struggling form in Rosa's arms, and my chest twisted painfully in a confusing mix of love, longing, and sorrow. I wanted very badly to go to her and just hold her in my arms, but I couldn't. Bella had to be my focus right now. I looked back at Jacob and breathed in deeply. "You do not touch her again. You do not think about touching her until I give you permission." Jacob nodded. "I'm sorry, of course." "Phone," I said softly, looking at Jasper. He reached into his pocket and tossed me his phone, never taking his eyes from Jacob. I caught it in one hand and turned around.
"Throw him out!"
snapped Rosalie.
"What the hell, Edward?"
she thought furiously. I started to walk back to the office. This would have to be explained carefully to my family, and I could not do it right now. "He can stay," I muttered, "for now."
"He tried to touch the baby!"
Rosalie yelled.
"Edward!"
I stepped into the office and slammed the door behind me. Alice was at the operating table, her hands gripping the side, her face strained. In my absence, she had been trying to apply her own venom to Bella's wound. Although the blood within Bella's veins was beginning to change, to lose the potent hints of flavor that triggered our natural reactions, her body was still coated in fresh blood. It was smeared over the table and onto the floor. Alice was desperate to help, but she was suffering. I went quickly over to her, taking her by the shoulders. "Shh, Alice, it's okay," I murmured. "Why don't you go?" She looked up at me, her eyes large.
I want to help. I'm so sorry I wasn't here for you before,"
she said, her voice catching.
"It was just the blood, and Rosalie, and Jasper."
Intense pain seared across her face, and I saw the memory in her mind of Jasper on his knees, clutching his head, rocking back and forth in the other room. A small noise was coming from his lips, his eyes pressed shut, his expression mangled. I realized that somewhere in the chaos I had tried so hard to fight, Jasper had lost his grip on his own emotions and had been swallowed up in the terror, pain, hopelessness, and despair. "Jasper needed you, Alice," I said quietly. "I understand." I looked at Bella, so quiet, so still. Terrifying uncertainty began pressing painfully against me. I felt a flash of confused panic. Would I feel better if she was shrieking in agony? Maybe, I thought miserably. I looked back at Alice. "I need to wash Bella and clean up the room. Would you mind getting me some warm water and soap?" She nodded, her eyes still strained, and started to walk slowly from the room. She stopped at the door, turning to look at me.
"What was that with Jacob?"
I gritted my teeth. "Nothing," I muttered. Alice shrugged slightly.
"I wish you had asked him to leave, at least for a while, Edward. I still can't see the baby. He's interfering with my vision."
She left, closing the door behind her. I flipped open the phone and dialed Carlisle. "Jasper?" he cried into the phone. "It's me," I whispered. "Oh, Edward, tell me." "She's okay, Carlisle. Well, her heart is beating again." There was a shattered moment of silence on the other end of the line. In the background, I heard Esme utter a strangled moan of relief, and there was a loud whoop from Emmett. "Atta girl, Bella!" he shouted. "Oh, thank God! Oh, Edward!" Carlisle pulled in an uneven breath. "Alice called to tell us the baby had been delivered safely, but Bella's heart was still not beating. So we... He paused, his voice dying out for a moment. "How is the baby?" "She's..." I paused, looking through Rose's eyes. I was momentarily panicked to see that she wasn't holding the baby, but she was looking at Jasper, who was sitting on the couch next to her, rather awkwardly cradling Renesmee to his chest. He was holding the metal bottle, and she was drinking slowly, languidly, her brown eyes examining him solemnly. "Her eyes are like Bella's," he thought. His mind was so calm, untroubled now, and I realized he was absorbing the gentle peace of her emotions. She was healing him. "She's perfect," I said. "She's feeding, drinking." "Drinking what?" asked Carlisle. "Blood." "Ah," he murmured thoughtfully. "Carlisle, Bella is still unconscious. I'm worried something went wrong. Her injuries were so extensive." "It's probably just the morphine, Edward," he mused. "It's excellent, really, if it is delaying the pain of the burning. I'll take a look at the injuries when I arrive. I'm sure she's fine, Edward." "Yes," I said softly. "We are coming as fast as possible. Your mother, she wasn't doing well." Pain filtered through his voice as his breath caught slightly. "Emmett's been carrying her, but I think she will be able to run on her own now that we know Bella is all right." I closed my eyes for a moment, imagining Esme's agony, waiting to hear if Bella made it. "How far are you?" I asked. "We will be home within the hour," he said. "And Edward, if Bella wakes up before I return, I want you to call in Alice and Jasper. I don't want you dealing with that on your own." "Okay," I breathed. "But dealing with it alone would be my cross to bear." "We'll see you soon. Everything is going to be fine." The line disconnected. A moment later, Alice came back. She had a bowl of warm water, a bar of soap, several washcloths and towels, and a trash bag. She handed me the bowl and then placed the other items on the chair. She left silently. Bella's clothes remained in tattered rags underneath her body. I gently put a hand under her torso, lifting her slightly and pulling out the fabric beneath her. I repeated this with her legs. I was terrified to touch her lower back, and gently eased the cloth out inch by inch. I balled them up and dropped them into the bag Alice had brought. We would have to burn those. I dipped the washcloth into the warm water, rubbing the soap bar over it. I wrung it out, and then gently began to wash the blood and sweat from Bella's face. I gently wiped her eyes, her cheeks, her forehead. "How are you doing, sweetheart?" I asked softly, gently swabbing the blood from her lips. I moved the cloth down around her neck and glided it over her shoulders. I dipped it again, wringing it out, the water turning a pale pink. Rubbing on more soap, I swept it over her chest and then down each arm, carefully massaging her palms and each individual finger. She was completely limp, no response. Alice appeared with a new bowl, and I handed her the dirty water. Taking a new washcloth, I wiped Bella's stomach and legs, and then gently cleansed the wound on her stomach. I examined the area of broken ribs, trying to gently press them back into place. "I'm sorry, love," I whispered, worried that I was hurting her, although she showed no reaction. "I'm sorry." Alice returned with more warm water, a white sheet, and Bella's bag of toiletries. "Will you help me wash her hair?" I asked quietly. She nodded mutely. Alice carefully held Bella's head up a couple of inches as I poured some of the clean water onto her hair. I rubbed a drop of shampoo between my hands, and then began to lather it into her hair. I massaged my fingers against her scalp, and then washed her hair from the roots to the end, rubbing it gently between my palms. I poured the remaining water over her head, the soap pouring into the other bowl below, with small rivulets running down her neck and shoulders. Alice left with both bowls, while I gently rubbed Bella's head with a towel. This time, Alice brought a bucket of water mixed with bleach, a sponge, and a mop. Using the sponge, I wiped all the blood off the operating table. Then I mopped the blood up off the floor. While I was doing that, Alice took the white sheet and carefully covered Bella up to her shoulders. "Thanks, Alice," I murmured, handing her back the bucket and supplies.
"Hold on,"
she muttered, going to the door and putting the cleaning supplies in the hall. She picked up something off the floor and came back in. She handed me a set of clothes.
"I thought you might want to change,"
she said with a small smile. I looked down and realized there were large splotches of blood on my shirt and pants. "Oh," I said softly. "Thanks, Alice."
"Do you want me to stay up here with Bella so you can go see the baby?"
she asked gently. My stomach twisted, and I felt the pull I had earlier to hold Renesmee in my arms. I reached over and placed my hand on Bella's arm. "I can't, Alice," I whispered. "Not without Bella." Her forehead wrinkled slightly, but she nodded and left. I quickly changed, dropping my clothes into the trash bag with Bella's ruined things. I pulled up a chair from against the wall and placed it next to Bella's bed, so that I could sit close to her. I touched her hair, feeling the damp, silky strands between my fingers. The familiar scent of Bella's strawberry shampoo floated up, soothing me. I stroked her translucent eyelids, and then caressed her cheek with the back of my hand. I trailed my fingers down her arm and picked up her hand, holding it to my lips for a long moment. Was she conscious at all? Was she in pain? "Bella, sweetheart," I murmured, pressing her hand against my cheek. No response. Could she hear me? "I love you, Bella. I'm here with you, and I won't leave. We are always going to be together." I pressed my face to her palm, inhaling deeply. Her scent was different, changed, but with familiar undertones, subtly laced with morphine and the acidic smell of venom. Her heartbeat was just fractionally faster than normal. "Renesmee is so beautiful. You have such a beautiful daughter, and you are going to be such a wonderful mother. I can't wait until the three of us are all together." I curled her fingers over and encircled her hand in both of mine. "Carlisle, Esme, and Emmett will be back soon, and Renesmee is downstairs with Rosalie, Alice, and Jasper, and Jacob." My teeth clamped together, and I felt another rush of fury and disbelief. What was I going to do? Could I allow him to stay here? But knowing the strength of the wolf's imprint, could I make him leave? I tried to search for the shreds of affection that had developed towards Jacob before the birth, but I found only red-hot anger and resentment. Looking through Jasper's eyes, I saw Jacob downstairs, still standing against the wall where I had last seen him. He had not moved an inch. His eyes, though, followed Renesmee. Jasper was confused and irritated by his continued presence, and suspicious of his emotions towards Renesmee. Rosalie was sending him looks of pure hatred. I would have to be very careful when I explained to my family what had occurred between Jacob and Renesmee. If they misunderstood the connection that had been forged within him, if they thought there was a romantic element to it, I was certain that, where I hadn't killed him, they would. I tried to shake off Jacob from my thoughts. Later, I leaned over and pressed my forehead to Bella's leg. "I love you, Bella. I love you." I heard a whisper of bodies moving through the trees and sat up quickly. They were back.